So then we are back with more understandings of the time of the Second Tabernacle services are refined in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find in a layer of understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, where we find in very precisely from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage these areas of the time of the restoration, not only regarding then the tabernacling, but regarding then the politics and also the flow of events of the Gentile world as they themselves are refurbishing. So then the prophecy regarding then Yirmiyahu chapter 1:8, where even the Gentiles would be service people of the land. This indicates the organization of the Gentile world related with the politics and mostly important, related with the trade of the end. But the politics are also included in it. So then, what do we find as far as politics? Let's try to understand then, obviously, what then Daniel the prophet states in the 11th chapter of Daniel. And it states very importantly, reading from their whole works from the previous video, where then the audio was very clear, for the king of the north, meaning then the Soviet Union. At the moment, Mr. Putin is the leader of the northern kingdom. So then, he is then obviously the person that is going to bring then the later status of the Soviet Union higher than the first. How is he going then to get this objective then completed? There is only one answer and one answer only. Only via the socialist, capitalist form of government of China. That's why you find then the armies of China combining then with the armies of the Soviet Union, giving you then the clear understanding of the northern kingdom responsible for the security of the world, while then the kingdom of China, kingdom of the East, then obviously being responsible for the trade of the end, and then later changes hands from China then to the sons of Ishmael. These must be completed as per Ezekiel 37th chapter. Let's understand that not only this, then comes the politics of the situation. As we understand, the BRICS countries, they are coming together very closely, and then in September comes the negotiations of the banking of the BRICS, where then these nations must then gather the information and making these then doable, obviously with the main structure coming from China. Other countries, they have to adapt themselves and make it workable for them, but then when they are doing trade with China, there is already a pre-established system provided by the Chinese government. These then give us another section of the situation. We find then the previous status of the Soviet Union. So then let's study what went on. When the situation regarding perestroika came out, then the Soviet Union was dismantled, or then it was dormant for a time. How do we understand this? Not only the Soviet Union, but then you find Cuba, then you understand what went on with Fulgencio Batista. He was a scoundrel. He was a player of the United States. He was a drug dealer. He was then obviously destroying the wealth of the nation while making then a resort of the Americans. So then let's understand the important work of Mr. Castro, as he then had taken over the leadership of the island for more than 30 years. But then the work of Mr. Castro has not finished yet. There is a second section of the work of Mr. Castro. He has done thus far then what Daniel very precisely, more than 2,500 years ago, have stated very clearly. For then the kingdom of the north wilt return and wilt raise a host greater than the former. So we are speaking of the time of the former, when the Soviet Union was then active. So then Mr. Castro had the first work of the Soviet Union, then was dormant for a time. Then the latest, and then the very system where then the protection of the partners of China will be then protected. There is a second section of it. Then there is another layer related with the 61st chapter of Yirmiyahu in chapter 1:8, where these layers then must be properly placed, so then we understand the flow of events. So then the same structure is used for understanding of tabernacling. Very wisely, the Creator decided to use the same system of structure related with the Gentiles. They are layers of understanding, so then from generation to generation we understand then the consistency of the hand of the Creator until the closing of this age. We find in ourselves studying then the flow of events and the politics of this time of the restoration period. What do we find? There is then later a section of it related. Then he wilt raise a host greater than the former. It's because there is a combination of the armies of China with the armies of Soviet Union. Then the Soviet Union become the greatest military power of every nation of this world in the entire time of the past, present, and the future. So let's understand then what goes on. And at the end of the age, or the end of times, then he will certainly. Prophet Daniel, speaking of the layer of the Gentiles, is speaking certainly. The kingdom of the north then will come with a great army and with much equipment. These obviously related with the combat of the end, but we won't go there at the moment, because we are in the initiation of the first period of the transitional time, where the United States no longer has the leadership as per the law provided ended in 2010. The United States no longer holds the privilege of the leadership of the trade of the world. China has it. So then, comes then, and in those times many shall stand up against the kingdom of the south. Kingdom of the south is then Africa. So then let's separate what then the prophet Daniel is explaining, because these are compacted with layers of time. The most compact, the compactest section of the entire instructions related with the prophets is then the prophet Yirmiyahu. It is extremely compacted. You have to understand the times and the seasons, the times where Yirmiyahu was at, the politics of the time of Yirmiyahu, his understandings of the Holy Tabernacling, his function of pointing the people back to the instructions and then instructing them further for the coming of the Messiah, then the 1,000 years of the Messiah, then the birth of the Messiah via a virgin, then comes 1,000 years of the seat, then the restoration period, and then the events of these restoration period regarding tabernacling and regarding the political times, plus then the autumn feast. So it's not easy reading Yirmiyahu. You have to understand tabernacling very profoundly, so then you can unlayer those without jeopardizing its integrity. Extremely important. He must be then read properly, so then when you focus your mind on tabernacling, the other layers then is given you without jeopardizing its integrity. So then we find then, and in those times many shall stand up against the kingdom of the south. Kingdom of the south is Africa. But what do we understand as far as Africa regarding the layer of the Gentiles? What is the objective? The objective is the restoration of the trade then later given to the Ishmaelites. That's what they deserve, because Ishmael was a king. He was a king of trade. Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, gives the two sticks of the two sons, Ishmael and Yitzhak. Ishmael was a king. So then also later the Messiah was a king. But the Messiah was a king of tabernacling, explaining then his 1,000 years of kingship. Our objective is understanding the politics of this time, where then we already understand the function of then the Soviet Union as it was rebirthed, or it was reinstituted. So then we understand what goes on with Cuba, what goes on then with Brazil, and the link with Brazil, Cuba, and Mexico, and then the importance of the coming back of the Labor Party of Brazil. So then the objective started by Che Guevara in Congo gives us then the second section of the work of Mr. Castro. It's extremely important understanding these events, because they were already initiated, but then there was a time of dormancy, a time where then it would be laid at plain for a time. So let's understand what we can gather from this information. We understand then the second beast, United States, has no longer authority. Okay, the physical authority of the beast via a country no longer exists. What we have at the moment is only the spiritual form of Daniel, Baal, and the dragon. This is what we are experiencing. But there is no longer a power in a world representing Babylon. The second beast has ended. We are during the time of the restoration period, where there are many spiritual understanding of Baal and the dragon. But then further, we find ourselves then understanding the cleaning of the system. So then the stick of authority of Ishmael then later is granted. At the moment, we find then Cuba, we find then Congo, we find then South America, and also South Pacific, lining up themselves based from the flow of events of Yeshayahu, the flow of events of Daniel, and the flow of events of Ezekiel. Plus, if you then separate tabernacling, then comes Zechariah. At the moment, we want then the political understanding of our time, because tabernacling is secured. The first tabernacling is on the land of Cush, precisely where the prophet then gave the order. It must be done. So then, the flow of events of the politics. So then the Ishmaelites can have a plan of waiting. So they have a plan of existence. They have a plan of purpose. The Creator at the moment is working via these nations to prepare the way for the Ishmaelites very near in the future, so they can receive the stick of authority of trade as it was then at first. So then the combination of the two sticks combines the whole anointing of Ibrahim. Let's understand how it's going to work. So then, we find then in the sons of the violent ones, those are then the Africans. There is a reason why they are violent. Because Africa, in quote, has then, the rapage of Africa is then done for centuries. You find the Belgians, they nearly destroyed the land. They stole what the land had. And the Africans, most of the time, they're always in poverty. That's why they are the violent ones. They have a reason of being violent. But then let's understand why this violent status is so strong, and what is the reason why we are reading this section. There is a portion of it because we have to combine these with a layer of then Yeshayahu chapter 1:8. Then there is a layer of understanding there. We must combine them both. So then, what is the objective? You find in Yeshayahu chapter 1:8, obviously the coming and returning of the tabernacling. Very clear. You find then, woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. What do we find on the map? Southern section of the map you find in DRC, because we are speaking of the Gentiles. We are speaking of the riches of the Gentiles. So what is then the objective of these riches? It's for then the preparation for the Ishmaelites in the future. Starts with the bricks. Let's understand then Congo. Congo has then, for instance, 80% of the deposits of coltan, where you can use in computers and telephones and many other computerized systems, and then high technological equipment. What do we understand of Congo? Because there are so many nations stealing from Congo, it comes a time where the violent ones, they are engaged with the war and then removing those countries out of their perimeter. That's why they are violent ones. And at the time, at this very moment, UN soldiers are being then murdered, because they are facing the violent ones, and the violent ones will win. But will come a time where then the nations are going to come against them, and they are nearly, the DRC soldiers and those Congolese people, they are nearly put then themselves down. But then during this time where there is nearly no hope, comes the Soviet Union. Then prepares the entire DRC and organizes the mines for the BRICS. Thus then the preparation of the system later given the stick of authority for the Ishmaelites. So then, with these in mind, then we are finding the events, the political events of the time. Speaking of the former status of the Soviet Union, what do we understand? We understand then the friendship of the Soviet Union and Cuba. Then, obviously he was there, Nikita Khrushchev. He was very in tune with Mr. Castro. They were friends. And the relationship started. Then the revolution system was then obviously during the 50s and 60s in Cuba. Then Che Guevara went then to Congo. And the work has not finished yet, because the revolution of Congo must continue until the Soviet Union comes down. Thus we understand. And in those times many shall stand up against the sons of the king of the south and the sons of the violent ones, and your people shall lift up to make stand the vision, but they shall stumble. So when you read the rest of it, you precisely understand from the events of the BRICS, because as we know of, the Soviet Union is very influential in Congo, and then those nations involved with Congo other than the Soviet Union must leave the area. This is what you have the description from this section. Finishing up the work of Che Guevara. Extremely important. Not only then there, but then Brazil also has the Labor Party, where then Brazil at the moment is not doing very nicely. The country is not truly growing the way it should have. Then the previous president was doing a nice presidency, but then the nation unfortunately is going through lots of tough times. Then the inflation is somewhat stabilized but yet high. The USD is enslaving the country again, and there is not truly a perspective of growth for the future, because the decision was some time ago, very shortly, some 10 days ago, where then many nations, they have joined up the scoundrelization of the United States of then abusing their economical powers to produce more printed money and then wasting the resources of the future. There is no future for our country during these conditions. Our only hope is having Dragon Mart then in South Brazil. then the situation changes, because then we are in line with the events of the holy instructions. Knowing as the kingdom of the east, then you find a couple of chapters later in extra writings of Daniel. So then, not only this, but then you find the combination of the politics of Brazil, politics of Cuba, and politics of Mexico lining up as the Labor Party. So then, not only this, but then the understanding very precise of Mr. Castro in the 90s, where he said very clearly, he said the time would come for then a capitalism used in a socialist system. So then each nation, they are not going to be socialists, but they are going to receive via computer in a special trades system where they can exercise the liberty of staying away from a scoundrelized imperialist USD system, where then the nations, they are no longer enslaved by the imperialists of the North, speaking of the United States. So then we begin our quest then understanding precisely then Daniel the prophet as then a tradesperson. We understand the high knowledge that he was speaking of. We understand then Yeshayahu the prophet. We understand then the layer of the Gentiles being part of the restoration period for the objective of then giving the stick of authority for the Ishmaelites, and then obviously the Israelites via then tabernacling. This takes knowledge, takes study, takes time. When a nation does not understand English, when the nation does not study English, when the nation does not read English, when they are not in the computer studying the politics of other countries, when they don't understand tabernacling, then they can't understand the Creator's plan. And he said, my people are then destroyed because of lack of knowledge. Precisely in Hosea 4:6. These can give us only an answer only. There is no hope for Brazil at this time. The nation has given itself over to the USD imperialist, bankrupt system, where then there is no hope for the country. The only hope comes from the understanding of the true instructions, where then the new trade system from China, represented by the Dragon Mart, already in Dubai, already then in Cancun. So Mexico and Cuba are then linked up. But then lacks also Brazil being part of it via the Labor Party. Not only this, but comes then DRC or Congo finishing up the work of Che Guevara, because he gave his life for the cause and must be completed. And the cause of Che Guevara is then explained. Read the 11th chapter of Daniel from the original manuscript. It states very clearly, and the sons of the violent ones means rebels. Those are rebels against an existing system. Che Guevara started. He is part of it. We must understand the flow of this politics, because Daniel was very influential and he spoke very precisely step by step, but during situations of his time more than 2,500 years ago. So this is extremely important, because it unites the entire South America under a system where then it was already predicted more than 2,500 years ago. So then, not only this, but He's given us a very precise and clear path of then having Dragon Mart in South Brazil as part of the BRICS system, the new trades market, and then being against the bankrupt system of United States imperialists under the control of their own schemes, where they do not have any more authority of this time of the restoration period, and then leading it. It's no longer there task. The task is for the Chinese to take on and then do what they should do, and then make sure the world is at liberty from this scoundrels USD system. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.